You are listening to the City Podcast. Unadulterated, non-politically correct, unfiltered, real talk. The city from the inside out. With your hosts, Chad Cranston and Steve Mealing.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out. It's a beautiful Sunday. This film, you guys, if you get the chance to see it when it comes out, please do. It's going to be very impressive. We have a great panel here today. The Shape of Water. I was telling these guys they look very composed because there's some big stuff going on with these guys. As of yesterday, the film just won the Golden Lion Award in Cannes. So I think...
No, it was Venice.
In Venice, sorry, not Cannes yet. Thank you very much. So I think we all need to give a standing early. Everybody get up. Let's do this. Awesome. So my name is Chad Cranston. I am one of the co-hosts of the City Podcast. You can find us on iTunes and Google Play. If you're interested in talking about Toronto, we're a very Toronto-centric podcast. And again, thank you guys for coming out. So what we're going to do first and foremost is we're going to show the trailer for Shape of Water. Check the TV out. I think it's going to be the TV here. So this film is set to release or be in theaters here in Canada. I think, is it November or December? December this year. So in advance we ask, because this is a private event and the movie's not out, that nobody takes their phone out and films or records any of this stuff. We will have a Q&A after when all we're done. So like, just get your questions in your mind and get ready to ask these amazing, talented men questions.
Gentlemen. Morning, everybody. My name is Steve Mealing. I'm Chad's co-host on the City Podcast. I just want to introduce the panel to you here. Miles Dale was supposed to be with us. As you found out, he's in Venice.
Yeah, he's in Venice
accepting an award.
With
Guillermo.
Guillermo, yeah.
Well, they're, I think, flying back at the
They're on a
moment.
plane right now, I think, coming back.
Poor guys, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, the first person I'd like to introduce is Paul Asterberry. And Paul, we just got some credits I just wanted to run down the line for you there. The production designer. He's worked on such projects as Shut In, Pompeii, The Twilight Saga Eclipse, 80 Days of, or sorry, is that 30? 30 Days of Night, Assault on Precinct 13 as well. And we have Louis Cicada. Cicada, I'm sorry, Louis. He's a costume designer, amazing job. He's worked on such projects as Carrie, Mama, and The Thing. And just to my left here, we have Dennis Berardi. It's the worst here. He's a visual effects gentleman, the magician, as they like to call him, I've heard. He's worked on Crimson Peak, Vikings, Pompeii, Carrie, Pacific Rim, Mama, The Vow, The Thing, Hannah, and the Toronto project. Was it not Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
Yeah.
And I think we'll start off the questions with Chad.
Yeah, so because your producer's not here, I'm just going to throw questions out to you guys. So I'll ask you this first. What were the hurdles that you guys came about in trying to bring a film of this magnitude here to Toronto?
I'll just jump in. You guys roll your eyes or throw a chair. I say something that's off. But when trying not to be so specific about the script, I'll say that when I read the script and knowing the budget and also knowing Guillermo's standard, where
It's very high.
What's that?
It's very high.
Very high standard. Period piece, visually driven. And the architecture, and maybe Paul will speak to some of that, and the performance-based animation stuff was going to be difficult. I just was concerned about our ability to kind of pull it off with the limited resources that we had. But the nice thing about Guillermo is that he's kind of like the conductor, and we're players in his orchestra. He helps define the construct, the context of the movie, and within that we are able to play and pitch ideas. He, brings you back to the context when you're out of bounds. But I would say the big challenge was probably just the how-to. How are we going to make this on this budget and compete visually with, what's in the marketplace today? And every audience member is so savvy. There's no such thing as a low-budget looking film anymore, And I think we did a lot in the end. You'll be the judge. I think we did a lot in the end with what we had to work with. We're all very proud of it. But I think the biggest challenge, at least from my perspective, was resourcing. How are we going to get this done? Would you guys agree? Or?
Yeah, and Miles isn't here, but Miles is a big part of helping get this done. I mean, Guillermo had been trying to make this film since, I think, 2014, perhaps earlier.
Wow.
And there was because the resources were really tight, they ended up deciding. Guillermo was also, with Miles, was working on The Strain, a TV series shot here for 4 seasons in Toronto. In between season 3 and 4 was the little window that they decided would be a good opportunity to help share resources. It's the same Fox parent company, so there's a hiatus period where the offices and the stages had to be held for The Strain. So we, as a good producerial decision was to try to fit it all within that window of time. So we were able to capitalize on available space. Well, it's also very busy in the city, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
But we had available great space, and crews, we rolled the crews right through. So it was, again, because crewing is a very important part of the whole thing. So it was I'd say a good producerial thing, and I'm just saying that because Miles isn't here.
Right. Mr. Cicada, we were talking upstairs about this a little bit earlier. Maybe you can recite this back to everybody else here, but how did Toronto lend itself in regards to location and the ease of access to spots like you guys mentioned without having a budget, or a minimal budget, so to speak?
Well,
Resource.
From the costume level, this town is amazing with resources of manufacturing and tailors and craftspeople. So we basically gathered what we could and curated a collection of clothing that I wanted to see on the film. And so for that, Toronto's amazing. We went elsewhere as well, but the lion's share of the products were both designed, made, broken down, all in Toronto.
So did you go back to people that you've had relationships with to get this done? It was like, listen, this is what we're doing. This is a massive opportunity for everybody here, but I need your help right now.
Well, I think there was a little bit of, can you help us out on this one? Having come from the strain, having done 3 seasons of, a series that we were just pumping stuff out through our various suppliers. Here we had an opportunity to do something that was really special. And Guillermo, the great thing about Guillermo is that he's very specific and he knows exactly what he wants. So we were able to, put everything together and present, and from there build without, other productions, there can be a lot of waste. I know I said red, but no, I don't really mean red, or that kind of thing. But with Guillermo, he's very specific, and that was awesome.
Yeah, so with the specifics in the situation, you guys have all worked on the strain together, and he was the executive producer?
He was a creator. I mean, he wrote the books from which it was based on. He directed the first, the pilot episode, which was like a 90-minute sort of establishing, and he was ultimately the creative godfather of the show. I mean, he approved every single bit of animation from my perspective, right to the very end. After 45 episodes, he was still in it, and that's what you get with Guillermo. And if I can maybe speak for the 3 of us for a second, I think it's fair to say that we all did call in favors to make this work. But what you get with Guillermo is there's so much goodwill with him around the city because he knows the artist by name, the craftsman by name. In my case, he calls out our animators by name.
Right.
I want Pete to animate this, or and I'm sure it's the same with your.
There's hundreds of people, and he's really good. He's got amazing. He's got a memory like an elephant. He doesn't
photographic memory. He remembers everybody's names, and so there's a lot of goodwill when you say, look, we're doing this for Guillermo. Let's make this happen. People come to the table with a different perspective.
Yeah.
And he's really embraced Toronto and is, I think, made the most of it. And I would argue to say that I'm not sure that this film at this quality level could have been made in another city, let's say. I'm not sure. I mean, I've shot in 15 other cities in the world. I know for a fact it couldn't have been made in probably a city like New York.
Right.
We have a studio in New York, and I just don't see how that could have happened.
Is it because of why do you say that? Like, is it because of the grassroots of Toronto and the?
We have great crews. I mean,
Absolutely.
The business is quite established here now. I mean, I guess it really started in the late '80s. We all started around that time in the late '80s and early '90s, I guess. And at the time, you had to import a lot of a lot of key people, and now you don't really have to do it anymore.
So right here in Toronto.
And from my perspective, I'm in charge of figuring out the whole look of the film and designing and constructing sets. The scenery the quality of the scenery that I can make here is good or better than anywhere else I've found. And I have also, like Dennis, we've actually worked in quite a few countries together. I find it very, I mean, the scenic, you can always find somewhere where you can build something, but the final layer that we see in photograph, I mean, our sets don't have to stand up very long, so even if the quality of the build isn't great, there's always somebody that can build it, but to do the final patina, the final finish that we see and capture and keep on film forever, I've had the best scenic artists here.
So, well, my last question on the production angle of things, there's a lot of magic going on in this film, a lot.
Which we're not allowed to talk about, apparently.
We're not allowed to talk.
Well, we can talk about the magic in the city of Toronto, right? Being
Yeah,
essential.
yeah, that's what I was going to.
I don't know if everybody's aware of, but all 3 of these gentlemen are from Toronto.
From Toronto itself, yeah. So with that said, he allowed you guys to get creative and just take the reins and go with it. And like, if he needed to put his little tweak in there, I guess he would do so. Is that correct?
Well, he actually, in some way, sometimes you have a director that is very focused on the acting and other issues and not as worried about the look. They hire us to help create that look. Not so with Guillermo. He's involved with everything, and he comes from a visual background, and I think he's in the art department. I'm in charge of the art department. He's in the art department every day, twice a day at the beginning of the film. Every day, what's up? What's new? It's a driving force. But it was only 3 hours ago that you were here before. We have barely had any time. But he's always pushing, getting more. And if you have a director who doesn't have a vision and you've got the open, completely open window to choose from, it's really quite difficult. You'd think that it might be easier, but it's actually better when, Guillermo comes to the table. He has it in his mind, in this case, since 2014, the certain concept art that he's already had done, and he narrows the window down to like say this much, and then I think you end up with a much better project because we have a limited time. Then we can take that window and then we can really focus it, tweak it, to the utmost.
Yeah.
Whereas if you start here, you might end up here, but when we start here, we end up here, and I think that's the thing. I mean, the first day that I was on the job with Lewis, Guillermo pulled out, I brought the paint chips of like thousands of paint chips. We went through every one, and he just tag. This is probably this character's world, and you just touch all these different colors. So we had a palette that then I put that on a board, and he would do the same with Lewis with the color swatches. We compare the boards together, and then we knew from the beginning, what world, where we were in the color world anyway. And that, having a director who is that specific early on is fantastic from my point of view.
Right.
So you said he's very hands-on and he's very specific about things, but it sounds like he allows for a lot of collaborative effort, opposed to just being dictated as to what's going on. So you're allowed to bring a lot to the table.
Oh my God, yeah. If you don't, it's not going to go well. If you don't bring an original idea or pitch ideas within the context that he's set up, you're not going to get hired again. And he expects it, he demands it. As Paul suggested, he's very demanding. Certainly from my perspective in the digital realm, I mean, talk about hands-on. I mean, at one point on the last movie, we didn't do that on this movie, but he wanted to, but the circumstances didn't allow. I mean, he'd be on Photoshop at one of our workstations and painting a texture, and let's use this, and we would. And
I'll interject there for a second. Being hands-on,
yeah.
He had this in this one of our characters, Dixie Doug. It's a diner, and there's a little I don't know, a mascot character that's a part of the design of the advertising of this chain.
Yeah.
And it's a little three-dimensional man, and he literally, I had to bring him all the paints, and he had it on his desk. I have a picture of him on his desk, hand painting the first one to be just so, and then we gave it to the rest of the artists to copy.
Yeah.
That's how hands-on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit of magic there, eh?
yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all feel like hacks on a regular basis. But yeah, that's why you have to bring your A game, otherwise it's not going to go well. So you have to, every meeting I have, I'm well researched. I try and bring ideas to the table that are within the confines of what he's already set up. And if you don't, he'll literally say to you, like, what am I doing here? Like,
So is it safe to say he brings out the best in you?
he brings out the best in you. I mean, I was interviewed the other day, and someone asked me about how it was to work with Guillermo, because I've worked with him for now almost 10 years, I think. It's difficult, but he does bring out the best in you, for sure. You learn a lot, but I think you kind of learn a lot together. I mean, the thing about him is he's so well, he's got such a breadth of knowledge. Like, he's a film historian, he's an art historian. He will bring you references, and you can't lie if you don't know the reference. Like,
Yeah.
if you say,
You can't BS your way through it.
he'll call you on it, right? And so he made some arcane reference to me once about he wanted these clouds to look like they were in this painting that I didn't have a visual reference to, and I went with it for about 3 minutes, and he said, "You didn't know what I'm talking about, do you?" And he just calls you on it. So I learned the hard way to never do that again. But for the most part, it's really rewarding. I mean, it's challenging. I mean, he's I'll let the guys jump in, but every aspect, and I think Paul's point about he's involved in every aspect. I mean, he'll call gels out with Dan Lauschen, the cinematographer. He'll paint final touches on set for a scenic piece that's being done on set, right? We've all seen him do that.
Yep.
In my shop, he's like all over our digital tools as well, which he's quite astute in. And so he's sort of got this endless amount of knowledge. I mean, it's right.
And vision. I think it's about the vision. I mean, even on set, we have a scene that involved some blood work, and out came, we brought the palette with the blood, and he started doing the painting of the blood on the actor. So I mean, it really is truly hands-on from concepts to just before camera. He is in there and quite astute as to what he wants, what he doesn't want.
And I think we've all worked with directors where that's not the case.
Exactly.
And one would think that, that's a real opportunity to kind of proxy in as the director, right? And sometimes that works in your respective areas, but sometimes you just get sort of a shopper where you have to, and I use that in the derogatory sense, is that you have to present 5 different completely kind of almost complete ideas, and they kind of
pick and choose.
They kind of pick one.
Like a catalog. Oh.
Exactly, and that's a really difficult way to work. We won't name any examples.
That's for the better. Toronto's had a lot of films, major films, filmed over the years. I've noticed that they've kind of tried to disguise or try to portray Toronto as being a different city, as like a backdrop. When working on this project, did you guys find racing to Toronto as far as the vision is concerned, or were you trying to hide it and make it look like somewhere else?
It's set, it doesn't really, the trailer doesn't really describe where it is, but it's actually set in Baltimore in 1962.
Okay.
So we're actually not using Toronto at all as Toronto, but we're using there's a few key locations.
Landmarks, eh?
Landmarks. We used Massey Hall, for instance, as the key landmark. You see it in the trailer. And we transformed Massey Hall into an old theater that they live in an apartment upstairs from. And the idea for that theater, we used the interior of the theater of the Elgin. And there's an interesting thing, we're actually having our premiere screening.
I was going to say the premieres are tomorrow night.
And in the film, I don't think I'm giving away anything here. In the film, they're watching an old rerun movie in the Elgin. And we were very fortunate last year. Again, this is Toronto film community helping us. We needed to have an old theater that, in the 60s, the theater had kind of gone way out, 20 years before that, and sort of rerun B movies were being shown. We needed a beautiful theater that the Elgin was, but that it doesn't normally have a screen in it. So they allowed us to, TIFF allowed us to shoot the day after their last day of screening, basically a year ago. So we scheduled everything around it so we can come in, use for free the screen and the projection equipment to shoot our scene. And so it's quite.
And you're here a year later.
We're here, and we're going to be premiering in the Elgin with the same screen, presumably, that's in our film. So we'll see a double layer of screen. It's going to be an interesting thing. But that was a nice gesture from the city. Massey Hall is a difficult place to shoot because it's always so busy. And there was a lot of construction on the street right outside, so we had to schedule again about when there was a small window. We had 2.5 days, a day and a half, 2.5 days we had between performances there, and so we had to build this grand marquee that goes up, because it wasn't a theater, but Guillermo really likes the stairs and the red doors are very poignant.
Beautiful heritage look,
so
yeah.
We had to carefully pre-build this theater marquee that we couldn't attach to the building either. It kind of had to stand like on 4 legs. We just tucked it in there in a day and a half. We shot it that night, and we had a half a day to take it out the next day before they were loading in for the next concert. And then Dennis took over from there and added the rest of the sign above, and also got rid of the Eden Center, which doesn't really suit 62 Baltimore, and made a burning street sequence.
There's a
that's part of the magic
factory
then,
on fire in the distance, so we had to
And I can say, being part of the crew, going there, seeing it go up, and then shooting it, it was just like incredible work.
So fast.
I have to say.
It was like the team.
There were some long days on set for that.
Well, it was luckily
2 days, right?
There are different various crew members come in. The construction department swept in for a day and a half. Like we did 1 day and then a half, and then they shot that night, and we had to get it out by noon, I think, the next day. So it was quite an ordeal.
That's the magic. I mean,
A lot of people don't realize.
That's in a really downtown, very, very busy part of Toronto, but we were able to do it. I mean, we had obviously very tight restrictions, but we were able to do it. That was a good use of the city.
Shot it overnight and had a lockdown on the street right in front of the Eden Center.
Pouring rain. It was like driving rain and everything.
Pretty incredible.
Some people cursing your name that day.
Well, but it's film friendly. Like you can do it. And we try and treat the neighborhoods with respect to the extent that we can, and it works. You get it done, and it was really just one night of shooting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So,
it's pretty amazing. Chad, would you like to follow up with the next question?
Yeah, Luis, I had something in mind. So the movie is set and it's specific to its time period, right? So what was your inspiration on what your job was on the film?
For me, it was basically pulling together a bunch of imagery that, again, ran by with Guillermo and films of that period. And even though it's 62, just like right now, it's 2017, and everyone is wearing something that might be 5 years old or 7 years old, or people live in different levels of dress. And so for me, I think that was kind of a really interesting thing to do, because even though we were in 62, the movie itself, the community, the world was really looking back. And so we were looking at late 50s. And so for me, it was again, I touch on this curating a collection of clothing that I wanted to see either on a character or on a background, and it would involve, you know, texture and color and style and yeah.
Yeah, so while you're curating this stuff in this time period, you must have had some locations that you go to. So is there any spots that you
well, being a native of Toronto, I'm sure you have
well, I mean, you know,
some secret spots you might want to show.
Toronto is world renowned for vintage.
Vintage, yeah.
I mean, LA designers come up here, UK designers come here. The vintage here is pretty incredible. So, you know, we have some rag houses where vintage is born before it gets to the vintage stores, and we had a lot of vendors that were pulling choice pieces out for us. Mm-hmm. And then the biggest issue for me was fabric, is finding fabrics that were from the 60s. The technology in fabric now, everything's a lot thinner. Wools in the 60s for the men's suits were very thick. And I was hearing stories from tailors saying, oh yeah, I threw out three bales full of old wool because nobody wants it anymore. And we were just all crying.
Wow.
So for me, it really was trying to find the fabric. And Toronto's great, but we did New York and Montreal and UK and LA to really try to find the fabrics, because that was one area that was tough.
Mm-hmm. And are we going to find that when we watch this film that we're going to recognize all this, or do you just have it in subtly in regards to the costumes?
You know, for me in costuming, I think the success of costuming is not noticing it. So, which is, you know, a hindrance and I guess a success in the same time. I mean, if you don't notice it, then you don't notice it. But for me, unless it's called for a comedic moment or there is a point in the movie that it is really costume-y, which I don't think I can speak to. But otherwise, everything was very naturalistic. So that was, to our end, what we were trying to do was present realistic characters in realistic clothing to enhance the storytelling.
Awesome. You guys did an awesome job on that, by the way.
Thanks.
I think that's pretty true of all of our areas, is that if we become, you know, obvious, certainly in my world in animation and visual effects, we've failed, right? We don't want to break the suspension of disbelief. We want to help, you know, we want to be supporting characters so that the story and the performances and, I mean, we want to create the world, but then let the story, you know, advance in that world. But we don't want to be obvious about it, and I think we fail as artists if that happens, you know.
Although this film, being a fairy tale, really an adult fairy tale, there's quite an element of fantasy. So, and with Guillermo, it's pushed a little bit, slightly from my end anyway. The design of the characters all, I think it helps that the characters all feel like they're properly from that era. Our era. The architecture is correct and everything for the film, but the sort of the coloration and the patina and aging is pushed a little bit. Guillermo loves to push it a little bit to amp the sort of slight fantastical elements of it. So there is a sort of a hyper real. It's not really accurately real, but it's an elevated, stylized.
It's funny, you know,
1962.
Because having worked on you know, probably 40 feature films that were Toronto centric over the last 15 years. One of the things that happens at the end of the process is that the film gets to a DI stage, which is like a, you know, kind of a final coloring of the film. And where you have a film that wasn't really thought out, that stage is critical. They actually literally change
the whole
look of it in the last part of the process. And what happened on this film is that the look that was established was the look at the end of the process at the DI. There was almost nothing changed. Where you have all these knobs and the ability to change everything easily, like too easily, I argue. So I think one of the things I was pleased about is that vision was pure right to the end. And it was, I think, all the hard work, design work in the beginning, you know, which obviously Guillermo was the main driver of, and that we followed suit on. The film was the film at the end. It wasn't some strange, you know, situation with a rock and roll colorist going in and changing it all, which always happens, which is my nemesis.
Awesome.
The vision was there from the beginning.
I think so. I mean, what do you think?
And that's how you guys were able to shine, because you weren't scrambling. But there was a question I did have, is that was there anything that he brought to the table that you guys weren't able to bring to life?
There's no saying no to Guillermo.
No, he's not a guy you want to say no
And
to.
I think this applies to all three.
Yeah, no, you push the limits of the budget. Everything, time, everything is always pushed.
So you're just not allowed to say no.
There's always a way.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's always a way.
But you can be clever about taking what he really wants, and maybe there's a way to get it slightly altered and there versus. I mean, there's a way. You can't say no. There's definitely a no.
You don't want to say no, is what it's really. It's a good challenge, then, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to say no to Guillermo. No, it's not a good career move.
Any director, really. I mean, it's not just.
For me, it was also like I didn't want to say no.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Like you just had to find a way. You had to. You just.
From my point of view, we had to be very clever about how to transform sets and use them more than once. I mean, one apartment we ended up rebuilding, using elements of it to make 3 different apartments, and you probably wouldn't do that normally, but it was, I asked Guillermo, I said, look, I can give you this, but I have to, we have to shoot this part out, and then we have to have some time so that I can completely revamp it. Are you okay with that? Because I don't think I can, otherwise we have to go to location, and he loves shooting on stage. So, and there's an example of, well, I would have had to say no to outright new build, but I offered another option to get what he wanted, but not quite not starting from scratch, for instance. And and that's interesting. That works. And we ended up the strain was getting rid of sets for their series, so we ended up using the materials and the flattage and the risers, and it didn't look like the strain sets, but we used a lot of elements that, rather than starting from scratch, we were able to use materials and things that were already there to help us time-wise and, again, budget-wise. There was lots of things that we reused. So, again,
that's neat that you had the resources to do that.
Clever producing, I think, as well.
Clever producing, and also I think all the department heads, from costumes at Lewis and you, production design and digital world in my realm, but everybody all the way down the line. I mean, one of the things I found with Guillermo that you don't find with, let's say, other filmmakers is sort of this dogmatic approach to how to do something, because there are certain filmmakers that this has to be done this way. The one thing about him and what we, I think, did on this movie, given the limited resources in all of those early meetings, breaking this down, is how are we going to do this? And we didn't really have a preconceived notion. It just, the kind of best idea won the day. Like, I feel like my job is to influence my peers, give advice as to what we can do in the digital realm, and I feel like their job's the same thing, is to say this is what we can do, and we kind of influence each other, and I think the best idea tends to win the day if we're honest about it logistically, and what you can achieve on screen.
Toronto, what was available in Toronto and environs, neighborhood, influenced what was on the page. Like, Guillermo had started ideas for this film, like I said, in 2014 for the interiors, but we didn't really know what the exterior of our main sort of, the government lab that you see in the thing. And so there was spatial things were organized ahead of time, but there was no architectural definition given or design given and we ended up using, going to Scarborough campus, University of Toronto Scarborough campus, which is a brutalist building. It, post-dates our time by a little bit, It's a 64, our movie's 62, but that kind of architecture was also, in other parts of the world, also looked like that in the late 50s. So
Cold War era brutalist.
So we got to choose, we chose that, and then that completely influenced all the interior designs. And that's one example of having to using a city that has a lot of different looks, finding a great thing that, everyone loves, then it really will influence all those stage builds. We had so many stage builds were influenced by us using a piece of architecture, a defining piece of architecture. I mean, that one, and Massey Hall was another one, but that's how the city influences the look of the film.
Dundas West and Lakeview Lunch.
Standard. We are doing a Q&A part to this, and I believe we had some questions out there. Maria?
Not in his world.
I mean, I could tell you in the digital realm, I think the most challenging thing, and is becoming more and more controversial these days, and I'll not speak specifically to The Shape of Water, but is sort of a digital performer. in close-up, or having a digital performer as a lead player, playing a lead role. There are some limitations there that I feel will never capture the essence of a live human actor, and I think that that's probably a ceiling we won't break through anytime soon. But anything else, I feel, is probably mostly doable. I mean, do you guys have?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of all digital environments anyway. It's much better when there's some tactile things that people can interact with.
Yep. You want to give us your name?
Yes.
Sarah.
Sarah, where are you from, Sarah?
From Ryerson.
Ryerson? Awesome.
Perfect.
So you guys talk about Del Toro very fondly. You mentioned that on one hand it's very hands-on, and you go into every department and kind of put in his touch, but at the same time you still feel like you are teaching and you get the opportunity to kind of bring in your own ideas. How is that balance established, and do you ever feel like he's overstepping when he, let's say, goes in and paints a texture? Something like that?
Well, I don't think he ever overstepped. I mean, ultimately, it's a hierarchy in a filmmaking process, and the director it's his vision, or his or her vision. He's at the top. So there's you know, you're hired to give your best opinion and guidance and ideas, but ultimately, I think the final choice sits with the director.
Yeah, I mean, film is autocratic by definition, right? The director is the director. That's why he has that title. We yield to the director, obviously, unless we can influence him in a way that he agrees with, right? That's why I say I feel like my job is to influence and to present ideas. And in that way, it's sort of an idea meritocracy with him, and that he is open enough to accept an idea, right?
And he will also change and go, oh, you know what? No, I think your idea is better.
Yeah.
He will say that, and he has no problem saying that.
But there's a collaborative.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
I remember I presented him one thing. This is the other side of him, the kind of the curt side of him. I showed him an animation. This is actually not relating to The Shape of Water, and he said, "That looks like two turds swimming in piss." And I because his references are always sometimes so, I didn't really realize.
The turds can swim?
I wasn't sure if it was like a bad thing or a good thing. Then he said, "Don't ever show me anything like that again." Well, okay, so you don't like my idea.
Well, there are other things when we have some early concept art, and you go through a few things, and he looks at it and goes, "That one's not even going to make the book." It must be you're really bad if it's not going to make the concept art book, because the concept art book shows various early iterations before you come to the final thing. Well, if it's not warrants making the book, then the wrong direction.
Amazing. Your name and where you come from?
Joseph, just working in the city.
Joseph, can you speak up, please?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I'm curious about Del Toro's known for his the really interesting creatures that he makes in a lot of his movies, and I'm curious. Some movies are a lot of creatures, and this one I think is just the one main one. I was wondering, is it difficult to do a lot of different creatures, but they maybe not have as much screen time, or is it more difficult to work with one specific creature for the length of the movie in terms of costume, character design? Like, say this creature has more to do, is that harder, or is
More
it
featured?
A lot more with little?
Assuming there's only one creature in this movie.
Yeah.
I can speak from my perspective, and I can't give away a lot on this film, so I'll speak in general terms. When you watch the movie, you'll see that the asset, or Fishman, or Charlie as we called him on set, yes. is the lead character. We're starting another movie now where it's Hellboy, and we have about 25 characters that are playing. Not all as leads, but one obvious character that is a lead. And I would say that where you have a situation where there's like lots of visual sort of noise, let's say, or competing imagery that introduces chaos, visual chaos, that to me is an easier realm to work in than to do one thing absolutely perfectly and not break the suspension of disbelief in the moment. And so that's my perspective. I'm not sure if you guys would agree or...
I don't usually deal with the creatures that much, but I can say that Guillermo did hand paint, just like that little character that for as a prop in my department, he was involved hand painting the various iterations of Charlie's sort of beautiful skin patterns. You know, for weeks and weeks and weeks he was involved with that. I mean, it's when you're doing just one character, it's very, very intense.
I guess you were in the clear as far as the outfits were concerned. You did a great job, by the way.
The only thing I provided was a cover-up cape when he was anywhere in public with a hood.
I don't know if anyone noticed that he did mention, what's the next project you're working on? What was that?
Hellboy, yeah.
Oh, 3?
It's called Hellboy, the Blood Queen. It's, yeah.
I just had to ask as a fanboy of that movie. So.
Yeah, yeah. It's not Guillermo, it's not a Guillermo project. I probably said too much already.
That's why I had to ask. I would get killed if I didn't.
I'm in trouble, I think.
There's another question out there. Sir, your name, please. Perfect.
Yeah.
In the limits of what you're allowed to say, can you each tell us either your worst or your best memory of the production?
That's a great question, by the way.
We do.
Should have told me that one earlier.
Want to take that on?
There's a lot of silence here, guys.
I think you know, not to go on about Guillermo, but he really is, you know, become a taskmaster where you're really every day you're just, you know, trying to get him to be happy with what you're doing, and not that it was a problem, but I joked with him where he basically had a gun and he was shooting, and I'd be dancing every day. I'd be trying to show him something new, and so for me that was kind of fun. I mean, the rough. I can't really think of anything that was like super.
It wasn't. It was a pretty smooth shoot in a lot of ways from my end. I mean, there was.
Except for day 2. Do you remember?
We had a last-minute schedule change, and from my end it was a bit difficult because we were shooting again at Scarborough campus, which is a university, during August, which is easy to shoot at. That's the best time to get in. There's not as many students around. And unfortunately, we had some issues that we had to change at the last minute. So of course, then I had to do it during school year, and we had to go only on nights and only on weekends. So that was a bit of a big drag.
I think a low point, I'm not sure, I'm probably allowed to talk about the camera crane thing.
Oh yes, that's right, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Day 2 of the shoot, we had an accident on set, and we had a kind of a situation where basically our big techno crane got destroyed. So that was not a good day, I would say, for the crew.
Well, that was all part and parcel of that change of schedule.
Yeah.
It's an expensive crane, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. But yeah, so that was tough. That was a tough day because in fact it impacted a lot of people. It impacted the schedule, and our resources were so tight. But I think we came together as a team and found a way to make it work, and rejigging the schedule. And you kind of have a plan going into production. And from my perspective, because I'm on set usually from crew call to wrap, just consulting and surveying sets and lighting and everything. But you kind of prep. I prep 1 week at a time, and then right, you guys probably are way in advance of that.
Yeah.
But, when that changes, it's hard to react, But so that's.
I had a little part up in my throat, almost the very last day of shooting. It's The Shape of Water. There's a scene where there's a lot of water in a set, and so the set basically gets flooded. And of course, most sets are built with almost paper and sticks. It's like wood and little paint. So if you stick it in a tank of water, it's going to disintegrate quite quickly. So we had to make this small set completely out of metal and be very careful with the paint and everything, and nothing ferrous that would rust because it clouds the water for underwater photography. And we only had a small window. It was the last day that we had Sally, one of our main actors, and I'm sitting there as I'm watching the paint start peeling off the bathtub and peeling off, and I know we just have this one window, so we carefully cut it out and hope no one notices. Luckily, it's cloudy and inside a little bit cloudy and a bit murky under the water. But that was it was pretty nerve-wracking having to submerge this set that I wasn't sure how I hadn't done an underwater set before, so I wasn't quite sure how it was going to react. So that was my low point or nervous point.
So, any questions?
We had a few over here. Do we not, ladies? I thought I saw a hand earlier. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, awesome, guys. Thank you very much for coming.
Remember December?
Huh?
A December release date?
December 8th.
December is the release date, I guess, so
December
you guys
8th.
better look out for it in the theaters. I know everybody's going to be super stoked to see this movie. I'd like to thank you guys for your time.
Thank you,
coming
guys.
aboard. I know you guys are super excited about the award.
Yes.
Again, congratulations on that.
Toronto boys did us proud.
Toronto boys
Absolutely.
represent, you know what I mean? Tell Drake to give you a call at any time. We're happy to hang with you. Fox Searchlight would like to thank you guys, wherever you guys are, for putting this together for us as well, too. Carrie, thank you for putting this together as well.
Thanks for having us.
And
Maria,
Hit Lounge, everybody else, Producers Ball, Film Festival, go see your movies, enjoy the week, don't drink too much or drink as much as you want, just make sure you wake up and hydrate yourself with Flow. That was a shameless plug, wherever you guys are all over there. Thanks for coming out, everybody. Thank you.
Cheers.